There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension of lost games and dreams that never became a reality. A dimension that would be our own if only things had turned out differently. You are about to take a journey into a wondrous land where Sega's little grey box had a life far beyond that which we know. There's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, Episode 4 of the Games That Never Were. DJump by Ubisoft Paris was a 3D platformer that started development in 1997 and was originally planned for release on the Nintendo 64, but development later moved to the next generation of consoles, including the PlayStation 2 and the Dreamcast. A PC version was also planned. In the game, you play as a character named D, who while visiting a museum one day comes across an Egyptian statue, and upon touching this statue, he is transported back in time to ancient Egypt. Being lost in time isn't his only problem though, as he finds he's been transformed into a wooden doll. Your goal is to solve the mystery of why you've been turned into wood and find your way back to the present day. The objective of each level is to make your way to the end and find a place to rest. While you sleep, you'll have dreams that will teach you new abilities that will help you throughout the game. One of these abilities is the power to transform into a creature such as a snake or duck, which will allow you to get to areas that you couldn't otherwise. Another ability is telekinesis, which would allow you to move certain objects in the level. The game consists of 20 different areas, including the desert, the shores of the Nile River, and even the palace of the Pharaoh. One really unique aspect of DJump is the fact that D can have different moods in the game. For example, if he's stressed, he can explode into a ton of pieces, or if he's hearing music, he'll start dancing. All in all, DJump was looking to be a really interesting platformer with a lot of unique gameplay mechanics. The game was originally set to be released as a PS2 launch title, which would have put the release date somewhere around late 2000, but the game was cancelled for unknown reasons. ToeJam Earl III, developed by ToeJam Earl Productions, was the third installment in the series and was first announced in 1998. The game was originally headed to the Nintendo 64 under GT Interactive, but in April of 1999 it was announced that they had dropped the game due to poor sales of the previous installment in the series. After losing their publisher, the developers initially planned to move the game to the PlayStation 2, but ended up getting involved with the Dreamcast through Visual Concepts, who would ultimately collaborate on the development of the game for Sega's console. The game stars ToeJam Earl and a new character to the series, Letitia. You have the option to play as up to 2 of the protagonists depending on if you play solo or multiplayer, the latter of which can be played via split screen or online. Much like the first game in the series, ToeJam Earl III involves a lot of exploration and item collecting. The game is made up of floating islands on which you must collect presents and imbue the Earthlings with the gift of funk. They won't take your funky gift easily though, and will try and attack you on sight. Your goal is to turn the residents of the island from angry to funky by using a variety of weapons and attacks. Right off the bat, you'll have your basic Funkify attack, but you can acquire more attacks by finding presents that are scattered throughout the level. These presents contain everything from a boombox that makes enemies dance to a megaphone that freezes them. Another way to Funkify the island residents is to challenge them to a dance-off. Do well at this and you can Funkify a whole group at once. Once you've imbued the gift of funk on all the humans on a particular level, you can then take the elevator up to the island above. The ultimate goal is to bring your gift of funk to all the humans and creatures on Earth. ToeJam Earl III was originally scheduled for release in late 2001 on the Dreamcast, but due to the discontinuation of the console, development was moved over to the Xbox, where it was released the following year. The game received graphical upgrades due to the more powerful hardware, but dropped the online multiplayer mode because Xbox Live wasn't ready until a month after the game's release. Visual Concepts also had many changes made to the game before the final release. These changes included the addition of boss battles and mini-games, as well as the removal of the layered island structure of the levels. Instead of Funkifying all the humans to progress to the next level, you instead had to find keys to unlock all the doors on a level and complete all the mini-games. These changes were unrelated to the change of platform and would likely have made it to the final Dreamcast version. According to Greg Johnson, co-founder of ToeJam Earl Productions, the game was about 75% complete before its move to the Xbox. In 2013, a late build of the game was found on a Dreamcast dev kit and released online. Castlevania Resurrection, developed by Konami, was to be the 17th game in the Castlevania series and was originally intended as a launch title for the Dreamcast. The story of the game takes place in 1666, where Dracula has returned to the material plane with the help of the Countess and once again poses a threat to the mortal world. The portal created by the Countess to bring her lover back to the land of the living has upset the balance between good and evil, and causes a rift in reality that threatens to plunge the world into eternal chaos if not sealed. In order to stop Dracula and his mistress, the Guardians of Light create a portal through time to summon two members of the Belmont clan, Sonia Belmont from the past and Victor Belmont from the future. Together they must repair the rift and save the world from these evil forces. The gameplay in Resurrection was to be very action-oriented, much like the original games in the series. In the game, you would take control of either Sonia or Victor and fight your way through 5 levels filled with Dracula's minions. Many of the classic enemies return, including skeletons, bats, fishmen, and fire-breathing totem poles. The enemies in Castlevania Resurrection were to be a lot smarter than in previous games, thanks to the addition of a new artificial intelligence system which enabled enemies to work together. In order to fend off the evil creatures, you would have the normal Castlevania assortment of weapons, including the boomerang cross, throwing axe, holy water, and of course your trusty whip. Each one of these weapons would have a normal attack as well as a secondary charge attack, which would deal more damage. Along with your standard run and whip gameplay, the game was also to feature scripted action sequences, which had you doing things like running from a giant 3-headed monster while avoiding pits filled with lava and zombie hands trying to pull you into an early grave. Early preview builds of the game seemed to get very positive feedback from critics, praising the superb graphics, excellent sound effects and music, and fun gameplay that went back to the roots of the series. Overall, Castlevania Resurrection sounded like it was shaping up to be a much better attempt at a 3D Castlevania than its N64 predecessors. Unfortunately, after numerous delays, the game was officially cancelled in March of 2000. The cancellation was accredited to a number of things, from disagreements between the Japanese and American Konami teams to Konami's lack of faith in the Dreamcast, especially after the announcement of the PlayStation 2. While at one point there was indeed a playable build of the game, it's anyone's guess at this point whether it still exists. Redline Arena, developed by Beyond Games, was to be an updated version of the original Redline, which was released on PC in 1999. The game combined elements of both car combat and first-person shooter into a single game. Redline takes place in a post-apocalyptic world where the moon's orbit has moved too close to the Earth, causing chaos and turning the skies blood red. Society is split up into 2 groups, the insiders who live in luxurious domed cities, and the outsiders who are forced to fend for themselves in the hostile wastelands on the outside. Violence is a common theme for the outsiders as they're forced to live out their existence in fear of the many gangs who are battling for dominance. As one of the outsiders yourself, you must take up arms and kill or be killed. The gameplay in Redline Arena was described as being a combination between Quake 3 Arena and Twisted Metal, allowing the player to freely switch between driving a vehicle and running on foot. Whichever you choose, you'll be well armed with a variety of weapons, including a minigun, rocket launcher, plasma gun, sniper rifle, and even a spinning saw blade. The EMP is one of the more interesting weapons, which allows you to take out vehicles while on foot. Hitting a vehicle with this gun would cause it to stop short and throw the driver out of the car. Aside from the weapons, you'll also find your standard assortment of pickups scattered throughout the map, including health boosts, armor fragments, and of course a whole lot of ammo. The gameplay remains very much the same as the original Redline, but includes a number of fixes and improvements, including better AI, more realistic vehicle handling, and some changes to weapon behavior. Also, like the original game, there was to be a single-player campaign as well as online multiplayer, the latter of which was reportedly the reason for the game's cancellation. According to one of the game's developers, the Dreamcast's networking setup was not in sync with the Redline networking code. This was going to cause serious lag and latency issues and would have required a monumental amount of work to fix. Having only worked on the game for 6 weeks prior to this, the decision was made to cancel the Dreamcast port of the game. Development was then moved to the PlayStation 2, which eventually led to the release of Motor Mayhem in June of 2001. However, this game dropped a lot of the gameplay elements of Redline Arena and was a standard car combat game. It also lacked online multiplayer. While the Dreamcast version of the game was never completed, the progress they made on it was released as a PC demo, which is available as a free download. Galleon, developed by Confounding Factor, is an action-adventure game first announced in 1997 for the original PlayStation. It was the first game developed by Toby Gard, the creator of the Lara Croft franchise, after leaving Core Design. The game had many platform changes during its development, but the Dreamcast was the first system it was moved to after the PlayStation 1. The game's story revolves around Captain Rama Sabriye, a master explorer and swashbuckler who is called on by a friend to investigate a mysterious ship that was found in the port of Akba. Upon examining the ship, he finds strange cargo and clues that eventually lead him on a great adventure to find its origins. Galleon takes a lot of cues from the Tomb Raider franchise when it comes to the main character's abilities. He can run, jump, climb, swing, and do just about anything you'd expect from an extremely agile human being. These abilities come in very handy when traversing the terrain in the game. Throughout the game you'll be exploring caves and islands, scaling mountains, and even climbing on the back of a giant lizard. In addition to being quite athletic, Rama is also skilled in the art of hand-to-hand combat. Your moveset includes everything from your standard punch and kick attacks to wrestling-inspired throw moves and Jackie Chan-like spin kicks. As you fight enemies, you build up combo points which can be used to pull off even more powerful and complex moves. While Galleon has a big emphasis on action, there's also a big adventure side of the game. You'll do a lot of exploring and item collecting on your journey. This part of the game is very similar to a point-and-click adventure game in the way that you examine and pick up items. There's also a lot of interaction with the various characters in the game, which is expected since it's a very story-driven game. The game's creator even described the game as being a real-time interactive movie. Galleon suffered from many delays and platform changes during its development. While it started on the original PlayStation, development eventually moved to the 6th generation of consoles, where it was planned for just about every platform. The release date was changed many times over, but it was finally released in 2004 as an Xbox exclusive. The Dreamcast version of the game was likely cancelled in 2001 when Sega announced its departure from the console business. It's unclear how far into development the game was on the Dreamcast, as all the screenshots and videos are from other platforms. There are many theories as to why the Dreamcast had such a short lifespan, but one thing's for certain, it wasn't due to a lack of games. While quite a few of these titles made the jump to other platforms, many more live out their existence in that 5th dimension. These games may have been lost to the sands of time, but we can still look back and imagine what could have been. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The Games That Never Were, and until next time, thanks for watching.